So, anyways, a couple of quick announcements. Lunch will be right after a brief. I'm going to talk for a couple minutes, and then anybody that would like to talk can come up and say some words about my father. We welcome it big time. There's a guest book over here. Please sign it if you haven't already before you leave. All right. And I had a little bit of stress on the way here. I had my children's car broke down on the freeway, so I'm trying to unwind. It kind of threw me off a little bit. But, good afternoon, everyone. I believe most of you know me, but in case there is anyone that I have not met yet, my name is David, and I am Morley's, or as some of you knew, Joe's son. I am his third out of 5 children. On behalf of our family, my siblings and I would like to express our utmost gratitude for everyone making it out to the service today. We're sure that if Dad were here, he would be much honored, and we're sure that he would also be hoping that someone had smuggled a bottle of Jack Daniels into the service. He would also say that 85 years was very impressive on his part, and that he was happy to have lived his life exactly how he wanted. Every person here knew our dad. And every person here has their own set of stories involving our dad, and we would love it if you would share your memories with us today. Again, we'll have an open mic after this. But for now, we're going to share with you our father as we knew him. On January 30th, 1931, our dad was born in Rochester, New York. His parents, Morley and Marion, were both Canadian citizens. Not a whole lot of you knew that. But they had settled in upstate New York. In 1948, at the age of 17, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. He was assigned to the engineering department, where he remained for his entire 21-year career, serving both in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Eventually retiring as a decorated chief warrant officer, somewhere in the middle of his Navy career, he began our family with his first wife, our mother, in Boston, Massachusetts. Together they had 5 children. In 1966, when we were all quite young, Dad was relocated to San Diego, where he remained until his passing. Dad was always very proud to have served in the military. During his career, he served on the following ships: the USS Saratoga, USS Hyman, USS Lake Champlain, USS Independence, and finally in San Diego, the USS Kitty Hawk, CV-63. He remained active till his passing in the USS Hyman Association. It was, it was kind of interesting. Every year there would be fewer and fewer association members. And my dad was becoming one of the elders for sure in there, and he had a lot of great friends in the Hyman. I was fortunate enough to attend some of the events. Him and Diane hosted a reunion here one year, so very important to my father, that's for sure. So in 1969, after retiring from the Navy, he began a brief career as an engineer at NAVSEA CENTPAC. And I see Mr. Tom Hand back here, who was his boss, and Linda Poe Hernandez, who was Tom's secretary. And they stole her from Tom back in the day, but that's another story. Tom, it's great to see you. After 5 years in a strong desire to make his own mark, he left the government and founded the ship repair company Propulsion Controls Engineering, PCE, with his 2 partners, Jack and Jim. For the next 27 years, he built PCE from its humble start in our parents' 1-car garage in Pacific Beach into one of the most respected waterfront companies in the nation, permanently retiring in 1996. My father, our father. Yep, beautiful. I still work in the company today, so it's still going good. When Dad wasn't working, he could frequently be found with our family. Growing up in the Clapp household was always an adventure. You can only imagine. Just like all the New York Claps, it's always an adventure. Right? Although Dad traveled often, in the early days with the Navy, and then with NAVSEA CENTPAC, he probably traveled even more. And then when they started PCE, it was basically 3 engineers from NAVSEA CENTPAC that saw a need for them, and they traveled even more. So when Dad was home, he made the most of it. We made the most of it. One of our fondest memories growing up was attending Friday night football games. This guy here, my brother Mike, was an absolute stud running back.
Yes, that's
right. Anyways, Dad would take the entire family to, anybody remember the name of the restaurant? It was a Mexican restaurant. So Mission Bay High, where we all went, they didn't have lights on the field, so our football field was La Jolla High. So all our Friday night games were up at La Jolla High. And Dad would always take us up there as a family. We'd have Mexican food, go watch Mike run for 185 yards on average. And then those were just awesome nights. One time in the late 70s, our dad bought a 1956 Chevy station wagon. 53 station wagon? Okay, you corrected me months ago on that too. Anyways, and he would occasionally haul us around in that. And every time he made a left-hand turn, the horn would sound, right? So all of his kids were always embarrassed about that, but I just remember Dad thought it was hilarious. Dad had a lot of friends, and he liked to hang out. And we're going back, I'm talking in the late 60s and 70s now. He had a lot of friends, just like he has today, and liked to hang out at the neighborhood bar with them. One time, he was giving me a haircut in the backyard. The phone rang. It was one of his buddies asking him to go shoot pool at the cabaret. So Dad laughed, and I went an entire week with half of a haircut. True story, but you know, hey, priorities are important, right? So when we were younger, Dad brought all of us on a trip back to New York to visit with his family. And if I remember correctly, it was in a Chrysler, New York. And apparently Dad was in a hurry to get there because the first day he drove 1,200 miles. Think about that. From San Diego to the eastern side of Texas in one day. He wouldn't even stop to let us use the bathroom. And I remember at least one of us kids had to pee in a bottle. That was Gary. Probably only filled it up a little bit, but Dad wouldn't even stop. So I guess if you were hauling 5 kids back to New York, you'd be in a hurry too. The best way to describe our dad was that he was always a great provider. Although in the early years we really didn't have much, our family never wanted for anything. Dad always provided it. As I mentioned earlier, he had 5 kids. Michael, Sharon, and her husband Tony, me and Dory, Nancy and her husband Bruce, and the baby of the family, Gary, all 6'5" of them. My dad was like 5'7" at the time. He was the proud grandfather of 9. Mike's son Mikey and daughter Sienna, Sharon's daughter Haley and son Anthony, my daughters Whitney and Brianna, and my sons Kyle and Christian, and Gary's son Dylan. He loved all of us. There's no doubt about that. So, even though he wasn't always best at expressing it, there's no doubt. Yeah, I have a lot of my father in me. So, kids, I let it run around. Although our parents after our parents' divorce, Dad was quite the bachelor for a while. He eventually met his future wife, Diane, and her son, Doug. For the last 30 years, Dad and Diane had quite the lifestyle. Some of Dad's favorite things to do were traveling the world, going on cruises, gambling at the casinos, and most importantly, in my opinion, entertaining family and friends. He was famous for telling about his winnings, but rarely mentioned the losses. In an evening, he could spend $1,000 to win 500, but in his mind, he won 500. Right, George?
Hey, Dave, right, Pete?
Pete knows, his host at Verona. Pete, thanks for coming today. Dad was much loved by all. That's an understatement. Family and friends were very important to him. For his 80th birthday, we went on a cruise from Florida through the Caribbean, and if I remember correctly, there were 59 family and friends that attended the cruise to celebrate my dad's birthday. Do I have the number right, 59? Something like that, right? Now, if that doesn't describe how important he was to his family and friends, I don't know what does. And I assure you the feeling was mutual, no doubt about it. So, a very important part of our father's life was his New York upbringing and family. And I'm looking at them now because they are such special people to everybody. And Marilyn, don't make me cry. I need a drink before you make me cry. He was very proud to have had Canadian parents. All of the New York family, I'm going to speak for you because I think it's accurate, and my father in particular, were very proud to have Canadian heritage. And I was very fortunate when I got married long time ago to have visited Canada with my grandfather, my dad's father Morley, and Aunt Marilyn. And that was something I will never ever forget. There was a graveyard, Picton, Ontario, Canada, in a little community or a village called Milford. And down by the pond, right? And again, this is 33 years ago. There's a graveyard, and there's clap headstones down there that go to like the 1700s, right? If I don't, so that's like this is not on my eulogies, but my grandfather was one of 16. Yes. One of 16. So obviously the mill of Milford had plenty of help. Anyways, he was very proud to have had Canadian parents, and when he was around his siblings and their families, he was absolutely in his element. He would visit his family as often as he could, and especially loved the Thanksgivings back in Rochester, where I will be for Thanksgiving in a week and a half. Right? I think most of you would agree that Dad was the patriarch of the family. Yes. And he cherished his role as the patriarch. And
couldn't have been a better one.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. Aunt Marilyn, I asked you not to make me cry. All right. He was predeceased in death by two of his brothers, Wayne and Warren. Kathy is here today, but she gets mentioned again. So, sorry, Kathy, that didn't come out right. And he was survived by his loving siblings, who all are here today from New York, all of them. His sister Marilyn and her husband John. John's not here. Her sister Sharon and Ron. Sharon is here. Brother Gary and Barbara Clapp. Brother Ralph and Debbie. And sister-in-law Kathy. He also had many nieces, nephews, and their families, some of whom are also here today. You all know again how much my dad loved you and how much you meant to him. Understatement of the day. I wish I could list all of you, but it's quite the large family. I mean, 59 went on a cruise, and that wasn't everybody. Over the past few years, Dad's health had been declining. As most of you know, though, he was a fighter and seemed to have 9 lives. He survived throat cancer and was in and out of the hospital numerous times through the years. Each time he seemed to land back on his feet. His luck finally seemed to run out, though, as the last few months were not as friendly to him. While visiting with him during his last hospital stay, he would mention that he just wanted to go home. And we all knew what this meant. He got his wish and passed peacefully, I'm going to say, Diane, at his home a week later. When we were waiting for the funeral home to come pick him up, my sister Nancy says, and this is my dad, and most of you know, my dad was always, he was always proper, always a gentleman. Sometimes, like all of us, we can overdo it. My father was always proper and a gentleman. I'm rambling a little bit here, but when we were growing up and Father and Dad had officer training, from that time forward, we always had to have our napkin on our lap at dinner at home. So anyways, so Nancy had made a comment that Dad has never ever left his house without being dressed appropriately. And he was in his underwear in bed. But so we decided to dress him in his Jack Daniel pajama bottoms. And Anne says, why don't we slip a bottle of Jack in his pocket? So he was taken away with a bottle of Jack in his pocket. It was perfect, for that was Dad. Yeah. Right? So, in closing, I would like to say the
Put my
following.
face. No.
We're all very sad that we lost our father. We are all extremely grateful that we had so many wonderful years with him. And we are happy that he is no longer suffering. Dad, we love you, and we will always miss you very much. So, thank you.